Oh, brakes aren't very good on this tractor. And I don't have a handbrake either. So that ain't going to work, is it? Let me turn back around this way then. There's nothing like the old school, and the Massey 135 is the headmaster of them all. Put in the comments if you disagree or you think there's a better tractor out there to represent the old school. And I've got a lovely 300 series Haybob behind me. Now, in the previous video, I cut this field ready for hay with my Sammy 110 and a 10.6 foot disc mower, which for 1.2 acres is a rather overkill. Now, I'm going to do a video about the Haybob today because there's some videos online already which are amazing. Even the Funky Farmer done one, which is a great video, but I'm going to go into a little bit more detail because there's a few other adjustments on it that can be taken into account. So we're going to TED with it, and then later in the video we'll be rowing up with it. So there's some chapters along the bottom so you can go along if you want to just go to the rowing up bit, but we'll show you what it all means. At the moment I've just hitched it up, I pulled it out the shed, so it's in the wrong settings for tedding because it was probably last used for rowing up, as will yours be. So let's have a look and see what we've got. So this here is it's a Vicon 300 series Haybob. Now, the most common Haybobs on the market are the 300 and the 200. The easiest way to tell the difference in the two is how wide the tyres are, because the 200 has got very narrow tyres, whereas this has got slightly wider tyres. Now, 300 meaning 3 meters wide, and also it weighs 300 kilograms. So which represents the 300 bit? I don't know, perhaps both of them. Anyway, we've done a previous video on this where Max, my son, and I went through this last autumn, I think it was, it could have been the beginning of this year. And we just serviced it up. So we greased everything, we've oiled everything, we freed everything up because it hadn't been used properly for a while. And that's what you'll find in a lot of Haybobs, that things are seized, but we'll talk about them as we go through. So yeah, simple, basic 300 series Haybob. There's others on the market as well, 360 and 380. 360 being 3.6 meters wide, much better for rowing up, and it spreads it all to one side, whereas the 380 is extendable, so you can telescopic, where you can extend it to make a bigger row for something like round baling or something like that. But this perfect for small baling, because that's exactly what we're going to be doing probably in the next video. Anyway, let's start with how we're going to set this up for tedding. Now, being that this is an older tractor, I'm going to have to leave it running to be able to keep the Haybob up so I can adjust it. Now, I could put a block underneath it if I was back in the yard, but I'm not. So everyone out there, turn your tractor off before you do anything. Obviously I wouldn't do anything with the PTO running, wouldn't get the tractor up. But anyway, first job, your swath gates. I'm going to move them out round, and then you've got these bars here which you clip in, and for tedding you want them out as wide as you possibly can. So you go right the way out through here, so when you're tedding, the grass is coming out and going whoosh out the back, whoosh, and giving it as much lift as possible to get as much air in underneath it to then theoretically dry it. So that's the first job there. Now we're going to sort our tines out. So the tines on the outside have two positions. The hole it is in now is for rowing up, or for raking as it's called, and the outer hole is for tedding. So I'm going to go around now and move that one out of there into that hole there. And that's simply done by pulling it out of that hole and then twisting it around there and slotting it into that one. Moving to the next one, pulling it out of that hole, moving it into that one. These have been overly greased because these were very seized when we took this tedder on, or the Haybob on. So they will be full up with hay horribly, but they needed to be like that so that those springs would get soaked in. So you go around the whole Haybob like so, moving it to that outside hole. Now the motion of putting it from tedding, or from raking into tedding, is easier than it is the other way around. But anyway, we'll do the other side now, and then we'll talk about the wheels. Right, so every Haybob has got 3 different holes here. Now that is to determine the height of your wheel underneath. Now, if you find a Haybob that has been used a lot and is a little bit seized, you'll find hopefully it's seized in the middle hole. And in the middle hole you can do tedding and you can do raking. Now, in that position it'll be absolutely fine, and most people run it in the middle hole, but generally the bottom one is for tedding and the top one is for rowing up. So today we're going to put it down, drop it down for tedding, and that's as simple as pulling out our pin, dropping it down and going in, like back in there like so, and locking it in. Most of the times these seize in there, and if you get a seized one, they are very difficult to unseize, shall we say. You can leave it soaking for years and it'll still stay seized because there's no way of actually getting in to that internal shaft. Right, let's do the other one. Right, there's one more adjustment on these gates that I'll show you. Now, I've never actually used this. I've always left them where they are, but you can take the gates out like so, unhook them like that. Now you'll see the block on the end here has different sizes. Now you can twist that round to be able to raise the gates up at the back. So if you don't want your gates dragging, or your crop is really light and fluffy, you can raise your gate so it's not going out over, it's staying in between. So we'll see what that happens later on to see if that makes a difference for when we're tedding and raking. And if I feel we'll change them back to, or change them around. Now I've forgotten which way it goes, there we go. And it's in, simple as that. Boom. Right, I think we're nearly ready to start tedding. A couple more things to note. One would be tyre pressures. Make sure the tyre pressures are even. These are meant to be 1.5 bar. Already done that. They are very perished, but most Haybobs already will be. Also, if you're Haybob, you're going to look for a buy to buy a Haybob and it's missing this swath board, you can TED with it, but you won't be able to row up with it because as the material comes in, it uses that swath board to hit it and go back through. Same if you're missing your gates, replacing 2 gates and your bars and everything, probably wouldn't be worth it. You can find one cheap enough that is still complete. Right, so when we pulled into the field, we were in the transport position with the gates folded in. And also this little latch over here, so you can see that little latch there, goes in over there. Now what we'll do in a minute is pull forward, turn to the right, which will then release this. We've got a rope going into the cab, we can pull that up over, which will then allow the tedder to swing back round behind the tractor. Now to put it back in transport, go back in the gates again, we'll show you later how that goes back in. Right, let's put it down and see if our top link is at the correct setting. Right, so let's engage the PTO. There we go, got enough rev behind it. There we go, pop that down. Now I'll drive forward slightly, turning to the right. Now I can flip that lever over that I said about. Right, so it's definitely not low enough at the moment, but as you can see that's now come back round square to the tractor. Now you'll see the time's just about touching the grass, but if we shorten the top length, what we can do now is allow that to come down and touch that a little bit more. Probably want to go down a little bit on our linkage as well. As we come through, going forward at the same time. Construction nicely on the left and not on the right. Give it a little bit more rev, get the time to come down. I reckon we're about there now. There we are, as we drive through that bit, it's picking up all of that grass. Lovely. Excellent. Perfect. Bang on that. Right, so on the outside round, I'm actually going to pull in this gate so that I'm not, well, I want to be about straight, I guess, so that hole there. So now, as the tedder flicks that back through, it's going to flick it out as wide as it can on this side, but on this side it's going to keep it in. So in other words, I'm not going to chuck all my material either out on the track here or into the hedge down the bottom. Now with these, you want to be driving anti-clockwise around the field. The main reason that you're not putting too much of an angle on your PTO shaft, on the universal joints on there, and also it will just follow along behind the tractor much better, especially when you're raking. Right, I think we're ready to set sail. I'm not actually in gear. That would help. On low 3, I think.
As you probably noticed, this is a very light crop, mainly due to the dry weather we've had this year and the fact I haven't applied any fertiliser on this field. So when tedding, I leave my machine on the ground from start to finish and simply drive round in an anti-clockwise direction. You'll see some people lift the tedder on the ends after doing the headlands, but the problem with that approach is it'll end up driving over the tedded grass, compressing it and pushing out the air. By keeping the tedder down, it picks up the tyre tracks and fluffs the grass back up again, which helps it drive more effectively.
Right, let's put these gates out as wide as we can. Now what I'll do is overlap that last row slightly, because obviously you've sort of created a bit more of a bulk there because you've, well, slightly rowed it up rather than spread it. So I'll overlap there slightly now, hopefully gain a much better fluffiness. Let's carry on.
and one of the most important things to consider when tedding grass, whether with a haybob like this or a larger machine, is your driving speed. Some people try to rush the job, either because they're tight on time, the weather is closing in, or they simply find tedding boring. The issue with going too fast is that you'll end up with a lumpy crop, especially in heavier conditions, which means it won't dry evenly. So aim to dry fast enough to get a good spread, but slow enough to avoid creating lumps. In this case, I tedded the field 3 times. In a heavier crop, it would have needed at least another day.
So that is all the tedding complete. Now I've just done a moisture meter test and it's coming out everything under 15%, bar the very bottom by the hedge, which is still coming out at like 35%, which is way too wet and green still, just because it's so much in the shade there until about 3 o'clock in the afternoon. So we're going to rake everything above that, but some of it is already overfit. So anyway, let's get the haybob set up. So it's in raking mode. So first job is to change all your tines into the raking position. Like so. You're probably going to clear some of that out. There we go. As I said, the grease, it was over greased, so there will be a lot of hay stuck to this. Yours might not be quite as bad. There we go, and go all the way around and do that on both sides. Next job, put your wheel up on both sides into the raking position. Right, and then I'm going to put your gates in so you can create your swath coming through. So before we've been trying to make the grass go like that, now we want the grass to go in like that. So I'm going to direct the gates to a reasonable size. Now we have got a very light crop in most places, so we don't really need a very wide opening. I think one more as well maybe. Right, now I don't think I said it before, but this is a top hole and that was a bottom hole. I think that's the right way around. Top hole for tedding, bottom hole for rowing up, so your top link actually stays the same. I'm not exactly sure on the science of that, because obviously you can adjust the top link and depends on where your wheels are and everything. So does it matter? I don't know. But anyway, we're going to move it to that hole because that's the right thing to do. So we're now all set up, ready to go raking or rowing up, depending on which part of the country you're from. So let's get it started up and go and do it.
When it comes to raking with a haybob, I always start by raking the inside of the field. The reason for this is so that when you are turning on the headlands, you're not compressing the rows you've already formed. In heavier crops, it also prevents you from respreading them from when you lift the haybob. So as you come down the row, lift the haybob on the linkage roughly where your headland ends. Once you've finished the middle, move on to the outside of the field and work your way around it in a continuous loop until the job is done.
So there we go, that is hay bobbing all done. Field has also been baled. That video, it will be the next one to follow this one. Now, to put it back into transport, it's very easy. Turn the tractor to the right again, flip that over on there with your bit of rope, and that'll lock in place. Fold your gates in, done. Drive out the field, put it back in the shed, oil it all up, grease it all up, all ready for next year. There's a couple things I'm going to need to do this because I've lost a couple of springs, because these tines are designed to spring back up. Got one there which isn't springing as well as it should, and there's another one over there. So yeah, always something to do, eh? Always a bit of maintenance. Anyway, so I hope you found this video informative and useful, or just enjoyed it, or perhaps you are a haybob expert yourself and know more than I do, which is a lot out there. And if you've got any advice that I might have missed or might have possibly been incorrect about, let us know in the comments below so other people can find that helpful. Also, let me know if you do agree that this is the best tractor to represent the old school, the old Massey 135, or if you think it's a better tractor to put on the front of a haybob, or whether you're a type of person who thinks that it should be called a hay knob, not haybob, because it's not everyone's cup of tea. Anyway, cheerio, bye.